Hey y'all. I've missed being on here with you all. How are you? I feel like I haven't heard from a lot of my YouTube friends in a while, and I just hope you're doing good. Think about you often and wonder how your life's going, and I just hope you're doing good. And I've missed being on here, so I am getting a download, you might say, in new agey kind of speak, but let me just share how this process goes for me, because I really hope that you'll find what I have to share valuable. It feels like it's not just for me. It feels like, which is why I'm here sharing it with you all, right? So here's how this process goes for me. More often than not lately, I don't have anything. It's kind of like, I don't know if I'm just tired. I'm not physically tired per se, like during the day, but it's kind of like I'm just not getting this flood of inspiration that I was getting for some time. And I've shared that with you all in the last few messages, and it's kind of been confusing for me. But what I've been doing with my time is I've been reading a lot in the Bible, and it's really cool. I'm not going in order. I'm not reading it front to back or anything like that. I'm just sitting down and opening and just looking at where I land and going from there, and doing a lot of highlighting and notes, and I'm really enjoying it. I really am. And sometimes I will hit on some particular verses that feel like there's something bigger there, like maybe I should share that. But then I'll just keep going. I'll keep reading, and then I'll forget, whatever this path was over here that I could have taken, because I'm just enjoying, the process, reading and taking it in so much. And so I think that's important, to pace yourself always in every manner, avenue, however you want to say this. But especially when you are on a journey spiritually of any kind. I think that if you especially are kind of I don't want to say a sensitive person with regards to emotions, and that be it, but as far as feeling like you are sensitive to messages that God places in your heart, to things that God reveals to you, a lot of times that kind of stuff can feel overwhelming, and it can kind of be hard. If it is a flood, in fact, that's coming in, it can be kind of difficult or hard to find a place to pinpoint and just anchor yourself in this particular point as this flood is happening, so that you can feel like you are able to transmute, alchemize, however you want to say it, into logic. It's kind of like this. I've shared this before too. I feel like as humans, we know that in comparison to God, we are very limited. Although, I'll just go ahead and debate myself right here. Jesus said when he was performing all these miracles that seemed impossible. Remember, all things are possible with God, right? But Jesus was saying, all these things that I'm doing, you can do these and even more. So I'll just put that out there as sort of a little side note, right? But in general, I think a lot of times we consider ourselves limited. And so I think when it comes to switching gears between being spiritually minded and then, logically minded, it's hard to whittle down this flood of, numinous messaging, or, whatever it is that God's placing on your heart, prophetic type stuff, okay? It's like it has to go through some kind of a filter, and then we have to simplify it and whittle it down, especially if we feel called to share it. And that process in itself I think requires a lot of us. And I think that when I say you have to pace yourself, that's really kind of what I mean. You have to not let it be overwhelming. I think that our part is to not only learn to be still, as we are called to do in the Bible, to have that connection with God, but, we're also required to be humble, to put aside any kind of pre-existing expectations of what God's going to say, or maybe our desires of what He's going to reveal to us. Maybe put that to the side. So that requires humility, it requires patience, and it requires discipline to pace ourselves and submit to His timing, because sometimes He will only give us a little glimmer, a little glimpse, and then we try to take that and run with it and glean some, not only just some insight and be satisfied with that one little breadcrumb, but we want to take it and we want to start to, from that point, do it ourselves and figure it out ourselves, when really we're supposed to just sort of be riding the wave, just sort of floating down that river of numinous information, trusting in faith that at the right time, God will reveal more to us, and at the right time, we will have revelation, but not by our own striving. Does that make sense? And so I think that when we don't have the whole picture, sometimes we can stress ourselves out. And I think that it's just a calling to release it. It's a calling to faith. And what we gain in the middle of all that is just a secondary benefit is we grow. We grow spiritually and we grow in our faith. And so that was really wordy. I'm sorry. I hope that makes sense to you. I feel like if it's a message for you, then it probably will make sense to you. And I hope that it's encouraging for you. But so here's what I've been doing in the meantime. I don't know why I'm holding this thing. Normally you can hear me fine when it's on the table. I'm sorry. I was probably like yelling all that in your ear. So let me set it down. Okay. I have decided to try a new hobby. This is something that's been kind of in the back of my mind for a very long time. And I'm just sort of not gone down that path because I felt like, it's going to take a lot from me. And what's really ironic, I started it yesterday. I'm trying to think if I started the day before yesterday. I think I started yesterday. My days literally run together. But it's knitting. I'll go ahead and share with you all. And my first, I think they call this a skein. It's not a ball of yarn, but I think it's called a skein. I don't know. Y'all are welcome to laugh if I'm totally wrong. So I have a lot to learn. This is it. And I love the different colors, just like a gradient of blues and grays. And I bought a little learner's kit that came with these knitting needles. And they're huge, and I'm working with just the end of them. And so like they'll get caught like in my clothing and everything while I'm working. And my hands are pretty sore, my forearms are pretty sore, but it's a lot of fun. So I want to share with you what I've made. The first little thing I made was just a little strip where I was practicing how to do the stitches. And it's kind of a mess, and I've got it sitting over here at my coffee station. But my first finished piece, and it's not, remember, I literally just started. It's a little coffee cup coaster. I've had my water sitting on it. So that's why I have this ring here, this circle of water. But it's meant to be like a little coffee cup shape, and it's a coaster. And I just made this little handle piece separate, and then I just kind of stitched it on right there. But it was fun. It was hard, but very fun. But you can see I have all these lumps and bumps and all these imperfections, which is completely fine because it's just, it's not like I'm going to sell it or give it as a gift or anything. I'm just learning. And then the second thing, official piece I made was this little bracelet. I used to buy these really beautiful knitted bracelets. I'll drop the information in the description if she still has her shop open. I don't think she still does this, but anyway, I made one. It's way too wide, and for now I just made like a little loop, and I'm gonna put a button over here, and I'll just kind of loop around the button, and then I'm gonna put something, a little pendant or something on the front of it here. And these are just cozy. I think they're just really pretty, especially in the winter and the fall to wear them. You know, if you have a real pretty long sleeve sweater and then you have your little knitted bracelets, they're just really, they give you that feeling of coziness, and I love them. So there's that. And then I made a second one this afternoon, and it's just got all kind of problems. There's like a hole in here, and there's a big poofy spot, but it's kind of made the same way where I made a little loop right here, and I'll make a little button and wrap it around. And I didn't make it quite as wide, so but it's fun. It's fun. And I've also been making, I don't think I've shared this with you all. I'll drop some pictures in because I'm wearing them right now. They're too tiny to share with you all, but I think I've already mentioned this. I have found these beads that they call seed beads, like literal seeds that you would plant. And they're tiny, and they're really, really hard to hold and maneuver, which is why I wanted to do it, because it was a challenge. And I have these little tweezers, like jewelry tweezers, and they're real lightweight, and they have like this long handle, and they're kind of bent at the end, so it's easier to hold and work with than regular tweezers. And I pick up the seed beads with those, and then I just have to focus. I put my glasses on, and I have to focus to put the elastic through the seed beads. Now there's tricks to make it a lot easier, but this is something that I'm not really trying to rush. It's just something to kind of, I don't know, it's kind of comforting. And I feel like when you're on a healing path and you're growing and all this kind of stuff, and your life has changed, maybe you've gone through hard stuff and you're in a transition, whatever it is, you're trying to just establish a new season in your life, however you want to put it. These kinds of hobbies are a good way. They're kind of like a good method to actually develop good habits as you're trying to break any kind of old bad habits. These are, and I'll tell you why. Like I said, with those seed beads, they have these little like flexible plastic, super thin needles that have a little hook on the end. And you take that and you can kind of like string, 8 or 10 of them on at one time, and then just put it on your elastic, and it goes faster. I actually was not, I bought a pack of 2 of those, and I've already broke one of them. So they're super delicate. But I thought, I broke that for a reason. I'm not going to go ahead and jump in and try the other one and break it right away either. I'll try it again later. So I just made myself stick with those little jewelry tweezers, okay? And the reason is, like I said, you have to focus. And it's just creating, I feel like, it's not creating patience in me, because I feel like I've kind of always been a very patient person, but it's just reinforcing that habit within me, within my mind. It's strengthening and reinforcing, a good thing, a good habit. And so I just encourage you to think about how you're spending your time, even just throughout your day, the way that you're doing things. Maybe you can do things a little bit different. Maybe you can pick up a new hobby. Excuse me. It's water break time. And I would just encourage you, when you're doing these things or you're trying this new hobby, to be conscious of what it is about it that is good and healthy for you, and likewise, just, if you can tune into how you feel, If you're feeling kind of dysregulated, anxious, just any kind of negative feelings whatsoever, that's like a starting point. I don't want to say red flag per se, but it's kind of meant to get your attention. Instead of blaming ourselves or, trying to medicate and suppress our feelings and stuff, what if we listen to them as messengers, is what I'm trying to say here. And so things that make you feel anxious, a lot of times, like in my past, early on, when everything changed in my life, I kind of had to work backwards and flip it around. It was kind of like I just noticed how I felt, but I didn't even know why I felt the way I did. And I had to work backwards and literally look at what just happened, and how long, had I been feeling this way? What changed? Was I feeling okay at 2 o'clock? And then at 4 o'clock, that's when it happened. Okay, then what happened at 4 o'clock? What was I doing? Who was I around? Where was I? What was going on? Ask questions. And just kind of be your own little detective. Just kind of investigate and be curious about things. And then at that point, you can start to deconstruct what happened and pinpoint these things that are people or places or situations or habits or whatever. You can sort of figure out what it is that caused these bad feelings inside of you or this dysregulation and avoid it. Just honor the fact that God gave us feelings because they're messengers, and that takes perseverance and strength and a willingness to be still, to consider things. I think, one big, huge shared habit that we kind of all get lulled into as a part of just, the modern way we live our lives, society nowadays, is a fast-paced life. And we miss so much because of that. And I think that we just don't realize that we cope with these Band-Aid like remedies that just sort of cover up and suppress problems and even truths that we really need to become aware of and all this other stuff. And then we just miss it. And we suffer for it, and then we're confused and we don't know what happened, and at some point we're going to have to deal with it. And I think that all this stuff just winds up piling up. And if you look at going through a hard time and coming to a place of transition, and maybe even just wanting to be by yourself for some time, or being isolated or whatever, more than normal, because maybe you're just kind of an introvert anyways, I don't know. But my point is, if you come to a place where you have a lot of time with yourself while you're on a healing journey, it's an opportunity to look back over, all of these situations and relationships and choices and everything, and discover those Band-Aids and rip them off and deal with it, and allow that transformation to happen in your mind and heart. And it's rewarding. It's so rewarding, especially, this is for me, okay, especially if you're not trying to do it yourself, because it's most of all an opportunity to submit to the Creator. And it's like you're peeling back all these layers of just mud and muck of all the choices we've made and situations we've put ourselves into and stuff that kind of covered up who you really are. And so, the Bible, a lot of what I've been reading about lately, and I've been flipping through like 1st and 2nd Peter, Galatians, Acts. I think those have been the most recent. The theme that I'm finding over and over is freedom. And here it is. So, for example, in Galatians here, it's chapter 6 at verse 11. The theme here is crucified to the world. And so he's saying, I think this is Paul, right? I read so much. I'll have to remember who. I'll look here in a second. Galatians. Pretty sure. Yeah. Yeah, Paul. So, verse 11, it says, he's talking about writing a letter with his own hand. And then verse 12, it says, and remember the word circumcision here. Just consider that in the definition of being used figuratively. Okay? So it says, as many as desire to make a fair shew, S-H-E-W, in the flesh, they constrain you to be circumcised, only lest they should suffer persecution for the cross of Christ. And then I looked up the New International Version. It says, those who want to impress people by means of the flesh are trying to compel you to be circumcised. The only reason they do this is to avoid being persecuted for the cross of Christ. So, and then, I've read on as well, like I was saying, and I'll drop some of these verses in the description after I film this, but ultimately, suffering in life is inevitable. And it's kind of like you can either suffer, for Christ and, be on the side of wanting to submit yourself, to the Creator and be willing to face, basically not being a part of the world anymore. And people see that. People that are worldly, who are on the other side, they're going to see that. And you're going to face a lot of suffering for that in a lot of different ways. And that's why the company we keep is really important, because we don't want people who have made the decision to conform, which is to live bound, not free. A lot of times they place those same expectations onto us if we are especially, in their family or married to them, or in their even social pressures in a friend group or within the workplace. Those same pressures and expectations are placed onto us. And a lot of times, we cave under that pressure. So it's really important it's not about confidence in oneself. I think sometimes when we're young, we understand that confidence and strength and assurance is necessary, but we misplace it and think that it's supposed to be within ourselves. And it's not, It's a matter of acknowledging God's Spirit within us, and that's what gives us the confidence to persevere and to say no, And you don't have to be, really bold and offensive about it. You can, what's the word? There's a particular term, and it just escapes me right at this moment, that basically means being able to be smart and say no. And I'll drop that in the description too if I can think of it. But, we can develop that over time as we grow. But there's suffering, going back to what I was saying to make full circle here. There's suffering either way. But it's kind of like, choose your suffering. Because in the end, right, those who chose the world, it seems like they really ran from their suffering because they found comfort in their fig leaves. Okay? So on my journey, what I've been able to discover is a lot of things that I sort of just brushed off, or that I tried to deal with by my own strength. You know, these are kind of like what I call band-aids. That was all done in my own strength. And ultimately, it's like fig leaves. And that kind of, anything like that is going to crumble because it's not rooted in the strength and longevity of God, who is Alpha and Omega, okay? So anything that comes from God is solid. It's solid and it's lasting. And that's how I look at that. And so people who have chosen the world, and we hope that at some point they will, you know, wake up and choose, you know, eternal life, right? The spiritual path. But people who have chose the world, I think that they're suffering a lot of times, and this is even looking back, you know, in my past, thinking that I had chose the spiritual path, but my actions were not in alignment with that. And so I did suffer. And so I feel like that gives me an insight to people who have chosen the other path, okay, consciously. Of course, there's probably still a lot more that I don't know. But I feel like maybe their suffering comes from having to go from one fig leaf to another because they crumble and they don't last. And there's this anxious knowing of they're going to have to scramble and find another fig leaf soon. And it's just sort of it's like building your house on sand, you know. So many metaphors in the Bible, so many parables that it's kind of like suddenly they all make sense after you've lived some time and experienced some things. But when you build your house on rock, you know, then you don't have to scramble anymore. But you're still going to suffer. You're still going to suffer because you don't feel like, well, you're persecuted for one thing. A lot of people will look at that and call you arrogant and label you and consider you an outcast, and a lot of things that really weren't ever meant for you anyway fall away at that time and stuff like that. That's hard. That's real hard. So anyway, there's verses that talk about all this directly. This is basically just what was imprinted on my heart after I got through studying this morning and yesterday. And so I'll drop some of those in the description. But I think that you know, we're supposed to encourage one another. And anytime you feel you're feeling the weight of being in the world but not of it, and feeling like you're this lone little fish swimming out in the sea and there's just sharks all around you, and you know, it's kind of like you have the choice to be a shark, but it really never was a choice to you because you just weren't born that way, and maybe you kind of swam with the sharks for a little while, and but you kind of always have this feeling like they could turn and devour you at any moment, and then eventually you grew up and you realized the danger you were really in and that you really didn't belong swimming with the sharks, and then you decide to make a run for it or a swim for it. I've got a ring on right now I bought years ago, probably on Etsy. It says, "Just keep swimming." Probably can't see it. It's that middle band right there. Just keep swimming. And yeah, and that's kind of how that feels. And then when you finally find safety, you know, let's just go with our little fish analogy, and you're down in the ocean here, away from the sharks, it's kind of like, okay, well, is this it now? Because I'm hiding away over here in this underwater, you know, cave or wherever it is, under this rock or whatever. But the truth is, if you could see up above the ocean and you could see down in there, you know, if you had that ability for the bird's eye view, you might say, then we would see all these other little fish doing the same thing, thinking they're the only ones, but they're not. And that's in the Bible too, how it talks about God's people being scattered, I think is the word that's actually used in the Bible. I'll see if I can find that verse too and drop it down in the description. But that's just it. It has to be for a reason. And I'm just saying that to encourage you that you're truly not alone. And praise God that we can connect with each other this way now, right? I mean, for real, on the internet. I mean, there's good and bad to everything. It's all about, what's in a person's mind and heart and their choices. But, because I'm pretty sure, I remember my grandma, she never used the internet, but she knew about it. And when it came out, and she called it the devil, She kind of literally wondered sometimes, like, is that part of the beast system or whatever? But there's been a lot of good to come out of it. And I think that, you're able to connect with, with your brothers and sisters in this manner. And that's just it. That's part of our assignment, is to encourage one another. And just don't forget when things shift in your life and you feel like you have swam into a den of sharks again. Just don't forget the strength that's inside of you and the power that's inside of you, and the fact that you really aren't alone, and that maybe you're there for a reason. So this is just a call to faith and to perseverance. And if you can, find a little joy here and there, consider what you're doing with your time. Is it producing good fruit in your life or bad fruit in your life? And make some adjustments as needed, So I'm coming up on 40 minutes. I'm at 32 now, so I guess I'll stop here. I try to keep it under 40. But I hope that this has been encouraging to you. I hope it got the wheels turning. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'd love to hear from you. If you feel called to share anything in the comments, I'd love to read that and see how you're doing. So thanks so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day. And I'll see you again very soon.